So welcome everybody to workshop number 3, creativity. First, I'm just going to go over a Youth Council Wild Tiger update. I want to make sure that everybody received their tiny tigers. So Serena, did you receive yours in the mail?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Awesome. So you might wonder first why I sent you 5. Well, I'd love for you guys to give 4 of them away to one of your friends or family. And what this represents, what a tiny tiger represents, is it's just a fun way to celebrate tigers. And a tiny tiger to me is the physical manifestation of your tiger awareness. So by having a tiny tiger, whether you simply know one fact that there's only less than 3,000 tigers left in the wild, or whether you know even more, you go into, why wild tigers matter ecologically, etc. Either way, having a tiny tiger represents you have some sort of awareness of tiger conservation. So it's just a fun thing to create international awareness. And it's going to be something that Wild Tiger continues to develop and grow as sort of the community of Wild Tiger supporters grows as well. So that is kind of an update on Youth Council. I hope the science committee has been doing a good job. So Sarah, why don't you give a brief update maybe on, I know Rushant said that he sent me an email and he said he'll fill out assignment 1 when he gets home. He's on a trip. But besides that, how's everyone doing?
Yeah, so you guys received an email from me after our youth council last month. So what was supposed to be done by today was to fill out the assignment 1 spreadsheet with your initials for 5 of the reserves that you wanted to research more. So you'll find the assignment 1 spreadsheet in the assignment 1 folder, which is in the science committee folder. And now going forward before our next youth council next month, what you want to do is you want to fill out all the rest of the information that's associated with the reserves that you have signed up for. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. I'll check in with you guys certainly before the council next month and kind of just keep tabs on, if the spreadsheet's looking complete. And once that's done next month, we'll move forward with the next portion of making the map.
Sounds great, Sarah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, now I'll lead the discussion on creativity in conservation science. I'm going to send you 3 questions on the chat, and I just want you to be ready to discuss one of the questions after I give a brief presentation. So now, like, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, how do you define creativity? And to me, creativity is the ability to be mindful about different possibilities and not being married to one idea. And an example of this from personal experience is very recently, for the last about 4 months, I have been developing an education project called Wild Kids on behalf of Wild Tiger. So for 4 months, I've been working on developing the project idea, reaching out to people, developing partnerships, etc. But about 2 weeks ago, it came to this point where there were certain things that just had to be done to make the project move forward that hadn't been done, and it wasn't really within my capacity to do them. Like I told you guys before, I'm getting ready to take the GRE and really focusing on field research. So an education program, it was kind of a reach for me. And that's kind of where I think I had this moment where It was both sad because I had to kind of put Wild Kids project on the back burner, but it was also a relief in saying, well, now the things that I want to do, I know that I can do. And this sort of change in my perspective on what I want to do, it also inspired me to just incorporate education into the research that I'm already doing. So Wild Kids doesn't have to be this grand separate project. It can just be a part of a research project that's already going on. So that was, yeah, it was both hard for me because I loved the Wild Kids idea. I'm very passionate about field education and research and inspiring, especially reaching the local communities and those kids who are actually living in these tiger reserves and in communities that are coexisting with tigers. So it was sad, but I also realized it just wasn't within my capacity. So that's how I kind of define creativity and conservation, is just adapting to situations, whether that's your own personal situation or whether that's a situation in the field or with the particular wildlife that you're targeting. And then now I'm going to go into an example of a creative solution in conservation. And I am going to screen share with you guys. Give me a second. And it's a video. So I think the volume should work.
North America, and some of the most endangered. In 1955, there were fewer than 24 of these elegant avian giants left. Now, after years of careful conservation, there are about 500. I'm in Wisconsin's Neceto National Wildlife Refuge. Joe Duff, founder of conservation group Operation Migration. Here, a small group of whooping crane chicks are learning to fly behind an ultralight aircraft. Skill they'll need for annual migration. Wilbur, Kyle Trek, Thompson, Corey. This year, I've been invited to fly along on one of their training missions. It's the very first time that a journalist has been allowed to fly with them. And if I'm going to fly with them, I've got to dress the part.
So Joe, these look nothing like a bird. It's designed to disguise the human form, so that once the birds are released and they encounter a normally dressed human, it's nothing they're familiar with, and they'll be afraid of it.
The main thing is to keep them from thinking that humans are something they want to be.
That's right.
It looks a lot like a whooping crane head.
They've been fed and taught to forage using this thing from the time they were just chicks, and they're attracted to it. You know, our headgear is white, so they don't pay attention to our head, they pay attention to this head. So who knows how they reason that out, but it works well.
The costumes even come equipped with sound effects.
This is a brood call or a crane purr, and it's, you know, it kind of says to the chick, you know, you're okay, everything's fine, I'm here, and it's calming. And they've heard this from the time before they were hatched.
Okay, well, let's see how you interact with the crane.
This doesn't look ridiculous, you're saying? If they're birds here? If they're birds are not quite so ridiculous.
And birds actually think this is going to get you off the ground.
That's right.
Did the sound work for everybody? Yeah, awesome. Kind of did. Well,
I heard, yeah.
okay. Well, you saw the visuals. I mean, the idea is that, so in 1860, there were 1,400 whooping cranes in the U.S. In 1955, there was 21. And now there are 603. And that is thanks to this sort of assisted migration program. And you can see there was a lot of resources that went into this creative project. People were paid to dress up as whooping cranes and train these chicks. And then they had an aircraft to teach them how to fly and how to migrate. And there's actually an article that just came out from NPR, and I'm just going to quote this article right now. It says, biologists have discovered that teaching the cranes to migrate seems to have created serious problems for the birds. They rarely reproduce successfully. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has halted the flights and is now trying to figure out what went wrong. So that's kind of an interesting story, case study in how they applied a really creative solution. They increased the population of whooping cranes, which was their goal, but now they've run into this kind of unforeseeable problem. So, you know, a question for you is, do you think, was being creative in this case, was it a good or a bad idea? And there's no right or wrong answer for that question. It's just something I would like you to reflect on. Both the bringing creativity into conservation science, the whole idea of this workshop is that conservation needs creativity, but at the same time we need to be careful not to overlook unintended consequences. So now I'd like for each of you to kind of answer one of these questions that I posted on the chat, if everyone can see that.
Well, I'd say just in response to the question even that you just asked, Sarika, about like, was it a success despite this unforeseeable kind of consequence that's happened now? And in the article it talked about risks being like a part of creative thinking. And how in conservation, you know, sometimes it's a little bit more high stakes, I think, than business, because you're not talking necessarily just about loss of money, which of course is a high stake, but you're talking about like the possible extinction of an entire species, right? But in this case, they, you know, applied a creative solution, took a risk, and numbers are up. And so maybe it's now just a time of hoping to find another creative solution to do this, to deal with this new problem. But I think it's really encouraging in the article how they talked about taking risks as a necessity. Where I went to school, we did this whole unit during my graduate year. The whole university was a part of it, and it was on like the benefits of failure. So I think that it's like really important, you know, to take risks and, you know, maybe have not the best outcome, but if the process that got you there, you know, was beneficial. And then it moves to the next part of the article, was talking about how it was like learning, what was it, learning, adapting, and reflecting, or something like that, or learning, struggle, and then reflecting. So, you know, we all know that, you know, you learn from your mistakes is kind of a cliche saying for a reason. So. Sarika, you're muted.
Hi, I'll repeat that again. Yeah, Steph, Serena, or Dave, if you have anything to add on what Sarah said, or, you know, the Whooping Crane Project, or if you want to answer one of the questions, that'd be awesome.
Hi. So the question number 3, like, give an example of a creative solution applied to conservation. Now, in my experience, so while I was working with Snow Leopard Conservancy in northern Himalaya and Ladakh region, so as snow leopards are very elusive and they were heavily poached, and in India the population is estimated to be fewer than 500 individuals. So the organization SLC, they came up with this brilliant idea. I mean, it's used everywhere also, but there it made a drastic improvement there in the conservation of snow leopards, because they started involving local communities, and by local communities they started involving the Tibetans. which are the actual inhabitants of the Ladakh region. So what they used to do, like before, when a snow leopard used to get, used to get some livestock of theirs. So in retaliation, they used to kill the snow leopards. Now, killing any snow leopard is so crucial because every snow leopard is so, it makes a bad influence on other people, and it used to promote poaching also. So what they started to do, that they started to have these workshops in which the women folk were taught to make handicrafts with wool, because since wool is abundant, because it's generally sheep as the livestock which they use there. So they started making handicrafts of wool, like making small snow leopards, making ibexes. So in that way, um, people used to learn also other what other species are there in Himalaya by seeing those small wool models, and he used to bring income to them. So for example, if I go there, I can go and buy those small wool models, and it used to benefit the committee. That was one thing. The other thing was they started to make predator-proof corals, so that the livestock are managed quite well. And the third thing and the most important thing, that they made this community piggy bank sort of thing. So every month, all the villagers and the SLC used to put some money in that piggy bank, and if there was an accident or conflict, a kill of livestock, of example, yak. So the owner was provided with the the money, the equivalent amount of money, which in India, rest where the government doesn't give the same amount of money for the cattle loss, and that's the biggest thing which upsets a farmer. So yeah, so it's working very well, and people now, tourists have started to pour. Now we have something new called winter tourism, especially for snow leopards. Now the snow leopard sightings have increased in the last 5 years because of this program by the SLC, and it's doing brilliantly. And similarly, they have hired those people as local guides so that they get income also, and they are, because they live on the field and they are the best spotters of snow leopard. It's very hard to see a snow leopard in that kind of region. So they are now directly working with few organization or companies as spotters and guides. So yeah.
Great, Dev. I think you really touched on local community engagement. That was one of the things the paper talked about. And I think that's super important, involving the locals in the research of the conservation project that you're doing. To me, actually, I was sort of surprised that that was kind of included in as sort of a creative solution. To me, basic conservation should involve locals. So to me, that wasn't really being creative. That was just basic conservation. So that's an interesting perspective from me on involving locals in your conservation project.
For me, what really kind of stood out for me from the reading was, I think they called it poverty traps, but just kind of talking about how much poverty and conservation intertwine with each other, and just pointing out how in the poorest regions is where biodiversity loss is the highest. And I think just highlighting the whole fact that our efforts for conservation in the end can help with poverty just really emphasizes the fact to me the importance of conservation and how much it really extends in helping the people and the wildlife. And yeah, that was just really cool for me to read, and just kind of, again, reinforced how important it is to focus on conservation and how it can help with things like poverty, which you may not think are so directly tied to conservation, but they really are. So, yeah.
Just to follow up, I just lost there. That just made me think of, if you ever look at Madagascar, where the majority of it's preserved but the people are the poorest of the poor, and they don't really know how to benefit of it, and this is why poaching happens, because people need to make money, and they don't see the benefits because you have conservation efforts that aren't in touch with the locals. So I think what you both all said is kind of full circle, and you know, certainly the poverty trap is good for all conservationists to think about why people do what they do.
Yes, Stephanie, do you want to answer one of those questions?
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute, which was weird because I didn't know if I was unmuting you on accident. I was going to say, so when I originally would think of conservation, I think about, oh, what research can we do? What can we do that's the most efficient, logical, you know? So at first I was nervous about this because I was like, how can I be creative with everything? But reading the paper, one of the examples was the seaman helmets with the birds, and I actually remembered learning that in school, and I was like, oh, okay, so that is super creative. What else have I learned about? And it reminded me of, or I remembered a time we learned about, I think it was Australia, how they made kind of like fake frog-looking things, because I don't even remember what was going extinct, but they were getting poisoned by these frogs, and so they made these frog-looking things that they would take a bite out of and realize, oh, this makes me sick, I'm not going to eat that anymore, to like drive them away from eating the frogs. And so, I mean, I guess that's the example I thought of that was interesting or creative that applied to conservation, and it kind of got me thinking I shouldn't only think, oh, what's the most logical, how can I do research, you know, science, you know. It made me think I need to be more imaginative, have a better imagination with it, and think of it more as what can I invent that can be applied in the same sort of research or, you know, logical way, but also be creative. So that's kind of what I was thinking through this, and that actually helped me reading about that, because I was like, oh shoot, what's a creative example? And I was all nervous, but I realized that a lot of things are way more creative than I expected, I guess. So.
Yeah, what about you, Brooke? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Ah, there we go. All right, so I'm on my phone, so I haven't quite figured out how to actually see the questions, but I really wanted to touch on something that you had brought up, Sarika, about creativity. And having been in this field for a while, I have definitely learned that people in our field, and that I know that we are really, really easy to succumb to, is we get really stuck in our ways and what we think is the best for a species when really it might not be. And then realizing and being able to be open-minded and really listen to this new idea and really take it in and realize that this new idea that you had not ever thought of may actually be the best for the species. So I really think that is something that we all really must keep in mind if we are going to make conservation move forward and really actually save our planet, is we have to stay incredibly open-minded, but also remember that failures doesn't mean that we're a failure in our field or we're a failure in our life. Failures happen and we can learn from them. And I've really, really taken this to heart with everything I've done in my field. I've done completely left field things, like I quit the whole zoo world and I did all these different things. I'm in this crazy grad program, and just always keeping focus on the end goal that I want to save big cats. That's my goal. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get there. And just remembering that not one way is going to end that goal. So like you have this one goal, but all these paths go this way to get there. And just keeping an incredibly open mind for any creative ideas that you might have. And then trusting yourself that you will get that idea. never getting down on yourself that maybe this idea may never come. Like, you have no idea. There's a huge idea. You want to save tigers, and you have no idea how it's going to happen. But then just trusting yourself that you will find a way. And I think that's really hard because we are in a very doomsday field, and it's really hard to keep hope and to really know that every single thing we do, this youth council, this meeting right now, we are all making a difference in a way because we're sharing ideas. We're learning about new things that have happened that we've never heard of before. And I know that's more the philosophical way of this, but I've just kind of learned that sometimes we just need to be reminded of that it's okay that when we fail. It's okay when you don't get that job. It's okay when your research, you don't find anything statistically significant or anything like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. It's okay. It'll all work out. And I really think that's something that we should remember. And creativity goes right along that. Because, I mean, look, some of the greatest minds ever in history ever have failed more times than they succeeded. And, yeah, I really wanted just to hit on that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brooke. I think what you just said about, this group, we're all here talking about conservation, and this in itself is sort of a creative conservation solution, bringing together people who don't even know each other on a video chat every month and to work on projects together. It kind of seems kind of crazy, but I'm glad you guys liked the idea and trusted Wild Tiger. So now I would like to switch it off to Maddie German. She just joined the call, and she is our guest speaker for today. So Maddie is one of the most creative people I know. She does so many things. It was hard for me to even think of how to introduce her. So she performs in bands. She plays any musical instrument that you can give her. She has her own business, she teaches music lessons, and she produces videos. So welcome to our workshop, Maddie, and thanks for joining us.
I'm so excited and honored to be here. It's good to see your face, Sarika. And I'm looking at everybody's little pictures on my screen. I'd love an introduction if you guys wouldn't mind going through and telling me your names and how you found this program, like how you fell in love with it. So I don't know who's who.
I'll start. My name's Liz, and I actually saw Sarika hatch Wild Tiger in front of my very own eyes. So I've just kind of been along with her with the journey, and building the program with her has been exciting. So that's me.
Cool. And what's your background?
I just got my master's degree in conservation biology. I work at a nature center currently, but I'm looking for any new positions if you know of anything. I'll send you my card.
You got it. Who's next?
Hi, Maddie. You know me. I crashed on your couch a couple months ago, but good to see you again.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going well, and Sarika recruited me to be part of Wild Tiger while I was there on that visit, so that's how I became a part of this whole shebang.
And you have a background in biology?
Yeah, environmental science.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, who's next?
I'll go next. I'm Stephanie. I went to high school with Sarika. And I just graduated with biology, and honestly, I was looking at her Instagram one day, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do you do what you do? How do I get involved? And I just messaged her, and she told me about Wild Tiger, and, gone from there.
Cool. So exciting.
Hi, I'm Devran. My background is that I've just done my graduation in biotech, and I'm planning to do my master's in wildlife conservation. So I got in touch with Sarika when she was here in India last time, and she just told me that she is planning to start an NGO. I was like, yeah, sure, I will love to be on the same ship as you. So yeah, that's how I got in with Wild Tiger.
Cool. Thank you. Sarika, you're quite the evangelist. All right, almost. Who's next?
I'll go next.
Yeah.
So I'm Brooke. It was kind of weird, this connection, me and Sarika. She actually met one of my classmates. I'm currently a graduate student. And then this graduate student, she told me all about Sarika and Wild Tiger. And she's like, hey, you should apply for the youth council. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. And then when Sarika and I had a conversation and she really got to know me, she's like, oh my gosh, you need to be a part of Wild Tiger itself. So right now she's made me the social media manager, which was based off one of my graduate projects that I did called Big Cats Worldwide. So I'm currently studying, my undergrad is in zoology, and I'm currently studying big cat conservation through like education and outreach. Yeah, and so that's how I'm here.
Cool. Yay.
Hi, Jackie. I'm Serena, and I found out about Wild Tiger because I go to Gonzaga University, which is where Sarika went to school, and I got an email from one of my professors just letting some of the students know about the opportunity of youth council, and it was something I'd never done before, and it just seemed super interesting and like a great experience. So I applied, and now I'm here, and I'm going to be a sophomore getting my undergrad in environmental studies. So, yeah.
Yay, that's everybody, right?
Yeah, and I quickly wanted to tell you 2 of the youth council members who were supposed to be on the call couldn't make it last minute, I guess. So it's actually, Sarah, Liz, and Brooke are actually a part of the leadership team of youth council. So it's a good mix of really youth council members, but then also kind of Wild Tiger leadership team as well. So just so you know, Maddie. Yeah.
Yay. Well, I think it's important to always, the first thing I want to say is congratulations, and you should be proud of yourself. Congrats on being you and having the initiative and ambition and passion to build yourself up and really invest in who you are as a person, because not everyone does that. So in the middle of all the craziness, the first thing I have to say is thank you for spending your energy on yourself the way that you are. And then I just wanted to actually open with a really short, like minute-and-a-half long video clip of Steve Jobs, who I'm sure you all are familiar with, a founder and inventor in the Apple team, someone who revolutionized the world of home computing as we know it. And I just have like a short little blurb of something that he has to say, one of his secrets of life, and I want to share that really quickly if we can. So I've never done this before. Sarika, can you help me with this?
Yeah, so do the green arrow, do the screen share, and then click the video window, and then you can play it. When you go into full screen, you won't be able to see the Google Hangout, so it can be a little disconcerting. When I just did it, I didn't even know if it was working, but it was working. The sound might be a little bit off, but we'll see.
Okay,
yep,
so we can
I see it.
And I can just escape probably to get back.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see if the sound works or if the internet works.
So the thing I would say is, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it,
that's maybe the most important thing, is to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important. And however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
Yay, did it work?
Yes, it worked great.
Whoa, my computer's doing something really crazy right now.
I can see that.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, maybe, did you press stop screen share?
There we go. That was the perfect transition, right? So you guys heard the video. You heard what Steve Jobs had to say? Yeah. He is one of my heroes, such an innovator, because what he's talking about is imagination and creativity, and realizing that you have the power to imagine things that aren't there and then make them happen. And that's the essence of innovation and change and societal progression, spiritual evolution, personal evolution. All things positive are based on your ability to imagine that they would be different, that they could be different and should be different. And so at the root of creativity, when we're talking about creativity, I looked up a couple definitions. It's basically just the use of imagination to picture or visualize things that aren't already there. And then imagination is basically the same thing, the ability to build inside of your mind ideas and objects that don't already exist. And then usually you know, make them happen. Hopefully you make them happen. And I think that everyone is born creative. It's an interesting question to ask yourself, am I creative? You know, if I asked you, are you creative? I know most of you have more of a science-driven background, and we tend to get spoon-fed this idea that there's like the scientists and mathematicians and the artists and like performers. And I don't think that's really a fair divide for us to make, you know, because it really shuts you off from this whole other group of people. And in essence, it shuts you off from this whole part of yourself, this imaginative kind of young self, the person that you were when you were little and dreaming of becoming a conservationist or a biologist or an astronaut. You had this imagination and this natural ability to think about your future and these really exciting things, or to build the best fort, or to decorate the best like sugar cookie at Christmas time. A lot of people will always talk about how when they were younger they used to paint, or when they were a kid they took music lessons, but then they just stopped and they're not that creative. And creativity is something that, there's a really famous quote that kind of sums it up. Picasso, the famous painter, said that every child is born an artist. The struggle is how to remain one when you grow up. And I think when you're born, basically, the process of forming your idea of who you are basically involves connecting neurons in your brain. So you're born with something like 100 billion neurons, but only a quarter of them are actually connected. And the process of development and forming your idea of self and understanding languages and societal constructs is this process that you do inside of your brain, connecting all of the lobes and creating these truths that exist. And when you're a kid, you're not as impeded by this sense of self that we really start to develop in early childhood, you know, like 5 or 6. I work with a lot of kids teaching music, and that's when I really see it start to happen. You suddenly become aware when you do an action that there are other people around you, and they're watching, and maybe they're judging you or thinking of you. And all of this information is stuff that's happening in your prefrontal cortex as you basically cross-reference, like what's normal to do at church. It might not be the same that you do on the soccer field, and you're learning how to fit into the world. Your prefrontal cortex is basically about interpreting all of the incoming data and making sense of it and controlling your reaction to it. And as you're growing and forming that idea of self, we divide kids into right and left brain avenues, and basically the synapses that you fire in your brain or the thoughts that you think in your brain become embedded over time, and the thoughts or synapses that you don't exercise become like dulled in a way, like if you start playing the piano and you keep playing the piano and you do it every day and run that stuff over and again in your brain, you're going to get better at playing the piano. If you participate in creative things like drawing or writing music or songs, you're exercising that part of your brain. And if you move more towards a world where you consider yourself to not be creative, you're not utilizing this whole side of yourself that was there when you were a kid. It is there. Everyone has the ability to be creative. But I think recognizing that the most important part of being creative is basically being yourself and believing that you're creative because you are an individual person is the biggest first step. Because I think that you could never take a creativity workshop because everything you need to know isn't there until you decide to open up to it and believe in yourself and get to know yourself. Leadership, you can take all the leadership classes you want, but it isn't until you know inside of yourself what kind of a leader you are that you can ever affect powerful, positive change. And at the root of that is I think, undertaking a journey of discipline and practice in getting to know yourself and giving yourself room and space and a little bit of time and stretch to remember maybe when you were a little kid. Go back to that little kid place before you were so aware that you had school loans and you have a job to do and you've got to make this deadline and this. There's all of this information constantly swimming around in your brain. Go back to the root of what you dreamed of, like your biggest, bravest, wildest dream when you were a little boy or girl, and touch into that. It's, Sarika knows I'm a very spiritual person, but I use the word spirit as a way of talking about the essence of who I am outside of my body and outside of what education I have and my family and my skin color and where I was born and what I'm doing and my current bank account balance. There's something underneath all of those surface layers that we deal with in life. And it's the energy of who you are and what you believe in and what makes your heart turn on and what you're afraid of, at that very, very root of who you are. You can find your creativity, your sense of self, and your leadership style. Because when you get to the root of who you really are, you can start asking, what parts of that are you and happy being right now? How much of yourself are you truly being? And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that most people haven't done yet or wish they could do or would like to do. And it is a part of who you are, but it's not who you are yet. And you can start to look at why that hasn't happened. Why haven't I done this thing that I'm afraid of? Or why did I get this degree? Why am I afraid of making this move? And when you can come to terms with, usually you can look to your fears to find what you're really meant to be doing, because they're usually right in the bed beside your life's purpose. When you figure out what that purpose is and what you're truly passionate about and turned on to, you finally have access to the root of creativity, which is basically you. Knowing who you are and feeling confident in that so that you can turn down all of the narrative judgments and expectations and constructs of the world that you maybe haven't even thought about before. Like Steve Jobs was saying, everything that's in the world is there because somebody invented it and was like, hey guys, we should all do this. And we did, you know? And those people are no smarter than you. But you have to get in touch with who you really are and what you're passionate about, because as you undertake the role, or the road, I should say, of a creatively lived life, of a life dedicated to your passion to conservation, it's going to get really, really hard to do it, you know? It's really hard to know who you are and imagine that you could be that and go for it and have the life of your dreams. This is all creativity. You've got to imagine it. Then you go and try to do it, and you hit wall after wall, and you fail a lot. Especially if you're doing it right, you fail a lot. And it goes back to knowing that what you're doing is what you should be doing, because your brain is going to be like, oh, you failed, everyone's judging you, like you're a worthless piece of whatever. If you can shut down all of that stuff and just focus on who you know you are, what you're doing and why you're doing it, you'll be able to make it through the walls that people who don't know who they are and don't know what they're passionate about hit up against and drop out after, you know? So picking up some kind of personal love practice in the attempt to get to know yourself. For me, I started dating myself like 3.5 years ago, and then I proposed a year and a half ago, and then I married myself on my 30th birthday in a private ceremony and took all my friends to Vegas, and then I was like, guess what, guys, you're here for my reception, and they're like, okay, Maddie, whatever. But consciously fostering alone time and space with yourself, whether you go for runs or get a manicure or pedicure or cook dinner or do a Sudoku, whatever makes you have space to be yourself, very consciously invest in that time, because it's the root of everything else that you're doing. And once you, well, I guess this would be a good time to talk about creative flow. I think it's easier to be creative the more that you know yourself, because the biggest block to creativity is basically this part of your prefrontal cortex that's super responsible for awareness of self. And what it does is it filters all incoming information with questions and critique and like verification, which basically means that anything coming in gets slowed down, because you play, like in my world, I'm on stage, I'm playing a song, someone walks into the room, I recognize them, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's that cute guy. And as soon as I like have this awareness that I'm in a room with a cute guy and I'm playing music, all of a sudden I get nervous and I play a wrong note. In neuroscience today, I guess we're still pretty much in the infancy stages of neuroimagery from what I understand, but doctors have been able to observe the brain activity of jazz musicians who are improvising, which is basically one of the highest flow states that you could probably study, because as a musician, when you're improvising, you're making art in real time and in connection in relation to other musicians that you're playing with usually. And what they figured out, or what they found, was that when these musicians are in their flow states, their true flow states, basically that part of the prefrontal cortex that is responsible for awareness of self gets bypassed, because you can't go through that and really be flowing creatively in real time. You know, if you get stuck on questions of whether you're doing it right, or you know, was that the right note, or you know, I'm cold right now, whatever, the creativity gets blocked. So in your life, it's so important, even if you're not a jazz musician, but you're trying to come up with creative ideas for whatever you're doing, whether it's social media marketing or administrative stuff for fundraising, it's so important to invest time in figuring out who you are, finding the root of your passion, and then giving space to that development, because it helps you to just like not give a you know what about what people think. You stop thinking so much about what everyone else is saying, and you can focus in on what you see and what you feel and what you think based on what you know. The noise, the more you know yourself and feel peaceful about that, the more the noise starts to quiet down around you. And I know when you're in that place also, so much of what you all do and so much of what I do as a musician is about the connections that we make with other people, whether they're fans or donors or volunteers. Nothing in our world happens without a sense of connection. And it's much easier to truly connect and have real relationships with people when your mind isn't racing with these thoughts about what people think about you or how they do it, or, you know, are you wearing the right outfit? When you have all of those crazy thoughts running around all the time, or you have something else to do right after this meeting, it's hard to listen to people because you're constantly thinking of what you'll say next or how you'll respond or what you have to do next. So investing in that is, like, at the root of it, it's a connection thing. You're more easily able to connect to your world. You're more easily able to feel what's happening around you, because you can't figure all of this out. You can't be a leader. You can't make a difference in the world. You can't do anything by thinking about it and understanding it. At the fundamental core of what's happening, there's an intuition that you have about your life and an intuition that you have about certain things. And that goes back to the spiritual practice of knowing yourself, because inside of there, your guiding compass that no one can ever take from you, that is your secret key to success and manifesting your vision, is that intuition, that feeling that you have. And the more that you can quiet your ideas running around like the monkey mind, the more you can walk into a place and you can feel what's happening in the room, and you can feel what's happening with the people around you. And you can look at a broader picture and you just start to feel it and know it in a different way. Because I don't think humans are designed to live so separately with our cell phones in our hands and looking at screens and being disconnected. We're very much designed for connection. So at the root of everything is connection. And I can give you a few, does anyone have any questions? I have a few practical tips for how I foster my creativity and how I consciously develop it. But I want to make sure that everything makes sense so far to everyone. Any questions?
I just have a comment. Yeah, I liked what you said about kind of, it's almost letting go of your ego and letting go of what the people will think. And that's as simple as me having an idea for Wild Tiger and being self-conscious that, oh, maybe it's not a good idea, though. Maybe people are going to laugh at it because it's a bad idea. But, you know, you're going to share it anyways, because deep down I know, you know, my passion is to save tigers, and I'm going to do that any way possible. And if I think that this is a way, you know, I'm going to explore it. So I think that was a good point that you brought up.
Yeah.
But
I think on that point, it's really important to not attach any of your self-value or self-worth to anything that you do, right? Like, if you put an idea out and you've attached your value to whether or not it works or whether or not people like it, then you've immediately given away your control, and your value is attached to this thing you made, and if it's received negatively, you're likely to never put something out again. So I know in music school, a lesson I learned from one of my professors was, when you write a song, like, be in it, live it, breathe it, be the song, and then when it's out, it is no longer a part of you. It can't be, because you would never be able to do anything with it if you attached your value to the song. It's too vulnerable. It's way too intimate. So that's something really important, I think. That goes back to failing. Everyone who's successful has failed a bunch, because failing is innovation and progress. If you're not trying new things, you're not getting anywhere new. And it doesn't matter if you fail. Like, it's not a bad thing. So that goes back to being very aware that you can consciously rewire your brain to think of things in different ways then the world at large has like basically programmed much of us to perceive things. You know, there are greater powers at work, and so doing this makes a huge difference in the world in every way. So some practical ways that I stay in touch basically with myself and help myself to get into a flow state, which for me means, I mean, you can flow with lots of different things. For me, it means that I'm in a place where I'm not thinking about stuff. My mind just empties. I get there through yoga practice. That's something that I do that forces you to be fully in the moment without judgment. And fitness overall. I think picking some kind of active lifestyle, whether you walk or run or do a yoga class or ski or like do whatever, Muay Thai, can be, when you approach it with a mindful attitude, a great way to exercise that monkey mind and practice focusing in on what you're doing in that moment. And that gives you the ability to turn the other stuff off. And eventually it can turn into something that you control more and more. You can consciously say, I hear all these thoughts and I feel afraid of doing this creative thing, but I can turn off those thoughts so that I have room to do it. You know, I acknowledge them, but they don't have the same power over me that they did before. Meditation practices are great ways to learn how to control your mind, because it's basically all about that. Breathing exercises. A lot of times when I'm feeling anxious about something, I'll do a practice where I breathe in for 8 seconds and I'll breathe out for 4, and then I'll breathe in for 10 seconds and breathe out for 5, and then I'll switch it up. You know, just like you can calm your body and your mind with your breath, and that's a great way to exercise control over yourself when you're feeling feelings of anxiety or fear that often shut down the possibility of creative thought because you don't want to be judged. Picking new things to do, like learning how to do calligraphy or taking a cooking class or going down a new Netflix like rabbit hole of documentary series, taking in new information, and ideally doing new things with your hands or your body, like being on the whatever club soccer team, and doing things that make you feel vulnerable and kind of nervous about doing them is really important. Because when you're a child and creativity is at its highest, you live in a world where you do new things all the time, but there's no judgment for how you do them. You try to write your name and it looks like shit, but you're not like, oh my god, like I'm a horrible person because I can't write in a straight line. You're just like, oh, that's how I write my name right now. I'm sure it'll be better next time. And I think you stay young and your mind stays active and connected to creative source when you're trying new things and living inside of that space. And then taking care of your body and eating well and consciously. Don't go into a brainstorming session or a grant writing session after drinking like a huge Coca-Cola. You're going to be flooded with like caffeine and sugar, and it affects what you're doing in a negative way. You know, I like caffeine, but I try to be careful about sugar or carbs, just learning a little about how to eat so that your mind and body can feel good. And then I think, I don't want to take up too much more time, probably one of the most powerful things that I do in my creative world is I recognize the merit of concentrating and not concentrating. And this is a really powerful concept. Whenever you go in to do anything in whatever field you're doing, spend enough time concentrating on the task at hand to basically get down the bedrock details. So in my case, maybe I want to learn how to play something on the piano, a new scale, which is a fingering thing. So I would study the scale and spend just enough time to get the fingering into my brain. And then pretty shortly after you understand like the concept of what you're going into, I switch to not concentrating. And it's kind of a state that can jumpstart you into the flow state a little quicker. You say, I already know how to do this. I'm going to be successful. I'm not learning something with a long way to go up. I'm actually already halfway there because I'm really tuned in and open. And you know, I'm awesome. I'm smart. I'm going to do this. And you kind of go in with that energy and then you stop thinking and you just let it flow. And so for me, musically, that means that I'm flowing on the instrument. And I might miss a note and make mistakes, but I don't worry. I just keep going. If you're writing, picking up a pen and just doing free-form writing is really powerful if you're brainstorming ideas for a new campaign or a new management structure or a new concept, whatever. Just free-flow writing. Don't let the pen stop. Set the timer for 10 minutes and do it. That jump starts you into that creative flow place as well. And when you do sit down to try and be creative, I like to finish all of my chores first. So I would try to not have any huge email session looming over a creative session. I would instead wake up, do my boring email chores or QuickBook bookkeeping, and then the afternoon is open for my creative session. Turn off the iPhone. You can't multitask. No checking Facebook. Give yourself for a 2-hour block where you're not looking at anything else. You're not looking at your phone. You're going to give yourself a safe space to let that creative flow, start. And tune into who you are. Tune into that place where you really feel what you want to do, even more than you know it. You can trust yourself. That would be the closing thing I have to say. The secret key to success is knowing that you can trust yourself and you can trust your dream and you can believe in it. It's real. And the only difference between successful people and people who didn't live the life they wanted is that the successful people believed, even when it got really hard and they were eating ramen noodles and not sleeping and didn't have a house or a marriage or kids. Whatever you have to sacrifice, believe in that thing you believe in. Because when you connect to that, you can do anything. So I think I went over time. But
that's okay. That was awesome. I loved. It was very personally empowering. I think what you had to say, Maddie, and I'll just end that with I've been doing some research on how people stay productive, and there's a research study out there that the most productive people, they don't work the longest. They actually work and concentrate for 52 minutes, and then they take a break for 17 minutes.
Whoa.
And a break means a completely step away from the computer. Email and Facebook don't count as a break. It means having a conversation with somebody about your family or what you did over the weekend, and then you go back to another 52 minutes of concentration. So that was really interesting to me. It seems a 17-minute break seems like a really long time to me, but it's what science says, so I'm going to trust it. But I'm just going to wrap up by saying, everyone please fill out the evaluation. Looking forward to seeing your faces on the next workshop, which is September 12th. It will be on campaign planning. So I think creativity has a lot to do with creating effective campaigns. And then just a final thank you to Maddie for joining us and giving us some interesting insight into creativity. This was kind of interesting for me. I didn't know how people would react when I said the guest speaker was going to be a, musician and band performer and video producer. But I think it ties in well with the whole idea of our paper of connecting and surrounding yourself with unfamiliar people. And that's how to keep your ideas fresh. So any last words from anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being on the call tonight. It was great. Hopefully everyone got some creative flowing. I'm definitely going to go write in my journal a little bit tonight because I always skip that. But reflection is very. So thanks, Maddie, for being that inspiration, and thanks everybody else for the great discussion beforehand. Adios.